You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
New Zealand Herald rugby writer Gregor has a new book out. It's called Black Gold, Power, Money and the Team That Reshaped Rugby. It charts the evolution of the professional game and how the All Blacks became rugby's most marketable asset. It also, though, explores the pressure that making money puts on the players and their performance. It covers things like broadcasting, player salaries, sponsorship, taking games to lucrative markets, and striking the balance between what happens on the field and what happens off it. Gregor is with us. Congrats on the book, Gregor. I found it a really, really compelling read. The constant theme running through the book is the search for the best balance between high performance on the field and commercial success off it. So how hard a balance is that to strike?
That is exactly what the book is about. And in answer to that specific question, well, I guess it's becoming harder and harder and harder to get that balance right, which is what the book really explores, because there's an economic model here, a financial model, which has effectively demanded that more and more money be found. The costs of running professional rugby become ever greater. Players' salaries need to increase. They're in a global market. There's more and more players coming on. Everything is expanding. We've got to, the rugby union's got to pay for more players. Or female players now are part of the package. They need to be paid for. And really, there's only one asset in the game here, and it's the All Blacks. And we could say, well, that's the whole All Black family. That's Sevens. That's the Black Ferns. That's the All Black 15. We could argue that. But I think we all know that really it's the All Blacks as we understand them, the one team that's coached by Ian Foster. That's the one team that really has global brand value, big sponsors kicking all over it, broadcasters that want to get a hold of them and put their content on the TV. So that the pressure to make money is being put firmly on the shoulders of that team. And there's an ever greater need to make that money, and there's ever greater demands being made of that team because there's more sponsors now and there's more stakeholders in the game. There's a private equity fund manager that owns a stake in them now. And it's becoming arguably the biggest challenge for the All Blacks is not the threat of Ireland or France or South Africa. It's possibly the threat of their own commercial desire is what they need to be most wary about.
So that pressure then on the All Blacks to be the commercial cash cow, if you like, for New Zealand rugby, how big an effect has that had, and how much of an effect do you predict it will have on their performances on the rugby field?
Well, you can make various arguments about this, because we can look at the commercialisation program of the All Blacks intensified really from about 2012 when AIG, the American Insurance Group, came on board. And that created a real global feel to the All Blacks at that point. That's when we started to see them play in Japan, play in the USA, be dictated to a little bit by what the sponsor wanted as much as what the New Zealand Rugby wanted to grow the brand presence of the All Blacks. If we look at that period, you could say, well, 2012 to 2019, which was Steve Hanson's time as All Blacks coach, well, it's probably been one of the most successful, if not the most successful on-field period that the All Blacks have ever enjoyed. So you could dismiss any theory at all that commercialisation has impacted on high performance if you looked at those results. But you need to drill down a little bit deeper as well and go, well, actually, that was a once-in-a-generation group of players as well that they had. They also had a coach who was able, because of his standing and his personality, to push back against a lot of the commercial demands that were being placed on the team at that time. So there was a lot of internal tension with him, being front of house and big enough and brave enough to stand up to his employer to push back against things. And if you also look a little bit more deeply at the recent All Black results, with the last 3 or 4 years, which we've seen an intensification again of commercialisation, more sponsors, Ineos, Soltrad. The value of sponsorship on the All Black jersey has doubled in the last 2 years. The broadcast contract that kicked in 2021 is significantly higher than it's ever been as well. And if we look at that period in particular, we've seen arguably last year and the end of 21 some of the worst results under the professional age that the All Blacks have ever seen. So you can pick out different periods and look at different scenarios and see whatever you want to see. My feeling, and this is what the book gets into, is that there's no doubt that really over the last 4 or 5 years, the commercial pressure has intensified because the value of sponsorships, the number of sponsors, the value of broadcast contracts. Now we have a private equity group who invested in the team, has really put enormous pressure on the team. And we saw them really battle to get results at one period throughout 2022. That was really difficult for them to get those results. And that creates a whole different pressure again, because I would imagine that when they were struggling, the guys like Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who owns Ineos, Mo Altrad, who's the owner of Altrad, there's no doubt that these guys were asking questions of the rugby union, saying, well, you know, we've bought in here. What's going on? We didn't buy in to see the team lose 6 out of 8 test matches. Are you doing something to change this for us? What are you doing? So that creates, and the players and the coaching staff would have known that there was questions being asked by these bigger sponsors. And that's going to be forever now, because there's a fund management group that are going to be doing that all the time now in Silver Lake, wanting to know how the team's performing, because they need the team to perform to get a return on their investment.
Can you correlate, though, Gregor, that commercial pressure with the results, or is it just the fact that actually the All Blacks played a pretty good Irish team last year, for example? Is there any way of quantifying this, or is it more anecdotal?
It's causation and correlation working together in a kind of cycle that's hard to determine. Is it correlation to begin with that becomes causation, or the other way around? I mean, it's a fair point. There were other reasons why the All Blacks didn't perform, but I mean, the book gets into this. You could argue, well, look, the biggest problem that the All Blacks had performance-wise in 20 and 21 was they didn't have the right coaching group, clearly, because we saw them have to make a coaching change. Why didn't they have the right coaching group? We'll go back to look at who sits on the board. Where's the high-performance presence on the New Zealand Rugby board? Who's the board member that brings knowledge and understanding of high performance? Well, the answer is there isn't one. So they made commercial decisions around, they had people with commercial backgrounds trying to make decisions about high performance. They messed up the whole coaching process in 2019, left it too late. Then you end up with a head coach who's got the wrong guys around him, and that becomes a high performance problem. So you didn't take care of high performance by having the right representation on your board, because it was all about having commercial presence on your board. You pay a price for that. So there are dots that you could join all the way along here. Now, how much time are the players now spending leveraging all the sponsorships that the team now has? That's a factor as well. So there's more time being spent doing that. Does that take away from the amount of time that the players have got to prepare, for test matches, because they're doing more during the week? Well, we don't actually know the answer to that. But if you talk to coaches and you talk to players, there's a worry that it is becoming a problem, that internally there are too many hours being spent doing things they don't want to do. And what's the impact now of having this NZR Plus come in, which is this content hub that they've built for New Zealand Rugby? That just now means that the players have got cameras behind the scenes all the time. And that puts a whole sort of pressure on these guys as well, knowing that they're always being filmed, that what they do can always end up on TV. So you build up that feeling in the environment that there's a constant pressure on them. Does it impact how they play? Well, I think it probably does.
One thing that is obvious is that a lot of the relationship between on-field performance and off-field success seems to come down to the attitude of the All Blacks head coach. Is winning games of rugby enough now, or is the brief of the All Blacks head coach now necessarily wider than that to include these commercial factors?
Well, I think it's been wider than that for a while. I think, and the book explores this, that there was a period there when John Mitchell became the coach back in the early 2000s where the pendulum got pushed too far towards high performance, in the sense that he didn't feel that the team had any obligation, or had limited obligation, to oblige NZR's requests for sponsors and other commercial stakeholders. So when Graham Henry took over as coach, it was made clear to him and his assistants that the new world was very clear that there was an obligation to facilitate sponsorship needs, for players to take part, for this to be an amicable relationship between the two sides of the business. And they tried to get that balance fair and reasonable, and I think for quite a long period that worked. But every All Black coach that's been in the role since Graham took it has been aware that there is a need. You can't expect the players to pick up, $1 million salaries, and the coaches, by the way, are particularly well paid. So something needs to be done to generate that money. So the players have to buy into the idea that, yes, a little bit of commercial work is part of the package. They have to help with that if they want to be paid what they're going to be paid. So everyone understands that. But the question that you were asking at the start here is, where is the balance? And that's the bigger question. Is head coaches also know that their futures, their reputations depend on getting results. And so they want to maximize the high performance time that they have. They don't want the players to be pulled in too many different directions. So you do end up with the head coach going, actually, I'm going to push back against that because I don't think that's in the best interest of this player or our team this week to get the result that we need. So that creates a tension, and it's working out who controls the team, who actually has the right to say where the line sits between high performance and commercial desire. And if you talk to the commercial guys, they'll tell you that they've had too many coaches that haven't allowed them enough access. And if you talk to the coaches, they'll feel that they've had commercial teams that haven't respected, the boundary of where they want it to be. So you end up with this tension that's been built, and both sides could argue it's the other side that's at fault.
Such an interesting balance to strike. Gregor, what's your view of the Silver Lake deal? Is it a good deal?
Well, the actual deal that they've signed is the mechanics of that deal are significantly less detrimental to the long-term future of the business than the original deal that the players refused to sign. So the actual deal, as far as private equity deals go, it's probably fine. But the bigger question is, why do they want to be in partnership with a private equity firm? What has that done now to the whole environment of the team, in the sense that there's now a commercial partner sitting there who has only got one objective, and that is to make money. So that has changed the dynamic entirely. You have a sponsor, even AIG, who came on as a sponsor, who had a desire to see the team play in markets where AIG had staff and presence. You can understand that, and it kind of aligned with what the All Blacks were trying to do anyway. But now we've got this completely new element, which is this group needs to report back and say, look, we put $200 million into these guys, and we're now hoping to get X number of dollars back out of them. So they don't ultimately care whether the team wins, only in the sense that if it affects their ability to make a return on investment. So there'll be a point where they'll say, well, we can't have them keep losing because that's detrimental to our ability to make money. But it's not the same relationship at all. It's now very clear-cut that one partner needs to make money out of this. So as well as hoping that the All Blacks win test matches, they will have to do things like promote the All Blacks in foreign markets. They're trying to find 10, 15 million new All Black fans. So what does that mean for the team? Does it mean they're going to be playing more offshore? Does it mean they're going to be playing more games per se, full stop? So, look, I'm a little bit uncomfortable that sport has got into bed with private equity. I don't think that there's a long-term relationship there. And if we look at some of the private equity deals that kicked in the UK, CVC brought into the English Premiership, that's been a disaster. Financially, we've seen 3 teams go under, Premiership teams go under. I'm not feeling that this is going to end well for New Zealand rugby, but I'm open to see what happens.
All right. In the last couple of pages of the book, you're right. The All Blacks have even 10 years ago turned up with one thing in mind: to find a way to win. And a bit further down, what we can be sure of is that keeping the two worlds of commercialisation and high performance in an amicable and sustainable equilibrium is the single greatest challenge facing New Zealand rugby, and most likely will remain so. What do you predict? What does the future, even the next 5 years, look like?
I think there's a danger that the short term here is that the commercialisation overwhelms the team. I think we're very close to that point at the moment, and we've got a new coaching group coming in, guys with no history of the team, all of them. One is remaining, Jason Ryan, but really the new coaching group, they're into a brand new world here, and I have a feeling particularly with this content hub having been launched, that there's going to be a real desire and a real need for the coaches and for the players to keep pumping out content for that machine to work, for that goal to be achieved of building registrations to find more fans. I think that's going to be a huge distraction all of itself. And I think Silver Lake have probably got a few other plans in place that we don't know about yet that are going to increase the commercial pressure on the team to do a little bit more here, a little bit more there. They clearly need individuals to promote their own brands as part of this as well. That's another changing facet that we're seeing, as we want individual brands within the bigger brand of the All Blacks. That can be a distraction. That also goes against the ethos of the All Blacks to some degree, which has always been about team first. So there's an uncomfortable dynamic coming there about individual promotion within all this. And I think next year they're going to be playing 15 test matches, which I think will become the norm, and that's probably one, if not two, too many for in a calendar year. That's going to put an additional squeeze on resource and the ability for guys to keep, avoid burning out. So you look at all these factors building up, because that's clearly where we're going to be heading for the short term, because there's a short-term need to return, a distribution back to Silver Lake. That's going to be a problem, I think, in the short term, and I think we're going to see the All Blacks struggle under the weight of commercial expectation until something breaks, and then there'll be a reassessment about, where the balance sits. The needle will move too far in one direction, and then it will probably move too far back in the other direction.
Such an interesting time. Black Gold, Power, Money, and the Team That Reshaped Rugby by Gregor Paul. I found it fascinating. A deeply interesting read, Gregor. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope you sell heaps.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday, or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.